Welcome to an episode of It's Not What You Think. This is Rick.
And this is Darren.
And, you know, I don't know how many times you listen to the music, but I listen to the music once in preparation for our recording session. Then I listen to it again while we're recording it. You know, you and I listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I listen to it again when I'm editing it. And then I listen to it again when it gets posted, and I just want to make sure it's the same thing that I edited that's on YouTube. So I listen to the music about 4 times. And let me tell you, by the time I get to the 4th time, my perception's really changed. Like, do you remember we did an episode of Music of the Bible?
Yes.
And actually the episode title was Music for the Iron Age.
Right.
I remember I wasn't that impressed with it the first time around, but after I listened to it a couple times, wow, it's gorgeous stuff. You really need to go back. If you missed that episode, you really need to go back and listen to that. Music of the Bible is gorgeous.
Links to that episode in the description.
And if that intrigues you, then stick around, because this episode is music in the time of Jesus.
Right.
And so we're covering the area of 1 AD to 100 AD. So we've crossed over to the threshold.
Yep.
And we're now in the world of AD. But ironically, we haven't left the world of ancient Greece. That still plays
We'll never leave ancient Greece.
which is fine, because I love the ancient Greeks.
Right.
I mean, their philosophy, their architecture, their mythology.
True. Very true. All good points.
Yeah, I really like ancient Greeks. And their music. And their music, they're still composing music, even at this time period. Now, last week we listened to the Epitaph of Sikilos, and it was the longest / oldest piece of music we have in its entirety.
Yep.
Not long as in I take that back. I didn't mean to imply that longest as in length, but it was the oldest complete piece of music.
Yep.
And the thing is that we don't know when. We don't have a precise dating on it. It was somewhere between 300 BC and 100 AD. And so, even though we listened to it last week in the BC section,
right,
I think it's fair to give it another shake.
Okay.
And actually, it's on one of the CDs too. Because it's in something that Jesus may have listened to.
Wow, that makes sense.
Or heard.
Interesting.
So we'll listen to. We'll reprise the Epitaph of Sikilos. Since we're discussing ancient Greece, there's some really interesting passages I wanted to read from this book.
Sure.
In the Republic of Plato, he discoursed on the organization. Yeah, excuse me.
Take two.
Take two.
Exactly. Exactly.
Plato discoursed on the organization of a utopia in which music would build harmonious personalities and calm human passions. Gymnastics would build healthy bodies. Music and gymnastics were divine gifts to mankind for the express purpose of providing the proper degree of tension and relaxation to adjust the soul and the body harmoniously. And I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
He fantasized about a utopia where music and gymnastics were like the governing principles, the required courses.
And in classic Plato philosophy, it's all about balance.
Mm-hmm.
Finding a balance between the two.
Right.
Which I think says a lot about the track that we just listened to. As a drinking song, it's very soothing.
Mm-hmm.
Which may have been, we think of drinking songs in the traditional English fashion.
Right.
Of rowdiness and getting riled up and getting... But I think in the ancient Greeks, and I think pursuant to that passage, their drinking was more relaxing. Let's unwind. We're not partying.
Mm-hmm.
Except in festive occasions, of course.
Right.
They did have a Greek god to festivities.
Yeah, Dionysus.
So, but that is interesting, and I think it speaks to the timbre of the song we just heard.
Well, there's more about Plato and music.
Oh.
Music's power to affect persons favorably or adversely was derived from its structure. Music was constructed according to the same mathematical principles by which the universe has been formed. Thus, music stood in direct relationship to the universe as microcosm to macrocosm. The so-called golden equations written down by Plato in the Timaeus support the philosophy that God created the universe musico-mathematically, using the same proportions that determine the intervals of the musical scale. And here we have possibly the first indication that music can influence you and your personality and your emotions.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I could be incorrect here, but isn't there a traditional Greek myth about soothing a beast with music?
Orpheus was a great lyre player, and I think during Jason and the Argonauts, when he was with Jason, I think he used it to soothe the dragon so that they can get the...
And then the siren song affecting wayward sailors.
Right, yeah. Now, it may be an overstatement to say this is the first, but we do have we mentioned the first instances of scales based on harmonic theory by Pythagoras, and so this particular instance is probably unique.
No, definitely, and like the way that, I may be misunderstanding the passage, but if Plato was saying that the quality of music is in its organization, that I think is a pretty sophisticated understanding of music.
Right. He's saying that the quality of the music depends on its organization, and then your response as a listener depends on the quality of the music.
Right.
So if the quality of the music is soothing, then your response will be soothing. If it's energetic, then your response will be energetic.
Right.
That's advanced stuff, like you said. Check this out. This is Aristotle now. We're sliding over a couple of...
The student to become the master.
Aristotle stated also that it was not easy to explain precisely what potency music expressed. But it was clear that the various kinds of melodies, rhythms, and tunings affected persons in dramatically different ways. Music was peculiar among the arts in that it alone had the ability to influence character, and exposure to certain modal tunings over long periods of time brought about the characteristics of that mode and the nature of the listener. And so it's almost like a therapy.
Yeah.
You listen to a particular kind of music, and it programs you or massages your character and molds you into a particular person that's based on the music.
Yeah, and music therapy is actually becoming a really popular undergraduate study for a lot of musicians who are finding that they probably aren't going to be first chair at the symphony orchestra, so now what do you do with all these years of training? Music therapy. It's interesting. Aristotle, and the other thing that came to my mind was the classic images of like MK Ultra, where they would expose it. So that it's a conspiracy theory, but the theory goes that the CIA was experimenting with LSD and like the different effects of what LSD would do, and they would use like hypersensitivity. So it was like you're overexposed to loud music, and flashing lights, and then the idea is that have you ever seen A Clockwork Orange?
Yes.
It's similar to that, in that you're being programmed by the music.
Wow.
That also came to mind, but it's interesting that Aristotle is pointing this out because it's almost as though he's done that type of experiment already. let's run the nice soothing. It's the experiment where you do 3 different plants. One is exposed to heavy metal, one is exposed to classical, and one's nothing. Mm-hmm. What's the difference? And Aristotle did that 2,000 years ago.
Have you ever done that?
I haven't.
I had a student do that one time for a class project. And
did it work?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, the leaf, and actually she's photos and everything. The leaves were heart-shaped on one of them.
Is that right?
Yeah. Like the philodendrons?
Yeah.
The spade types, but they were like almost perfect heart shapes. It was really amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I was impressed. Speaking of impressed, I was also impressed with this CD. Music from the time of Jesus and Jerusalem's Second Temple. Now, we don't believe that, we're not implying Jesus was a composer.
Right.
But we've managed to pull together a selection of tracks that we believe were played during his time, that he was alive, and he more than likely probably heard.
In Jerusalem, too, is one of the hearts of culture, which is why it was such a sought-after city in subsequent years.
I didn't know that.
So it's a central location right on the Mediterranean, very, very accessible for trade.
Right.
So, and it's in one of the oldest cities in the world.
Rock and roll.
Jesus live in Jerusalem at the Second Temple.
Track, do you remember? Arabian Dance?
Arabian Dance, yeah.
Arabian Dance. Comments?
I thought it was nice. It as you say, there's that one part that sounds distinctly Arab. And it's probably common, our listeners are probably going to say the same. It's traditional music that is associated with scenes of the time in the setting. But it was cool.
And,
very cool.
And that's indicative of their scales or their musical organization.
Right.
Just like the ancient Greeks were saying that they have a musical organization. They've discovered one based on the harmonics.
Right.
And the Persians did as well, and the Egyptians did as well, and that's why when you listen to these different, and the Chinese, etc.,
which is interesting.
You can say, oh, this is Persian music, or this is Egyptian.
Which is interesting because we've explored in previous episodes that the Hebrew alphabet is numeric.
Right,
all the characters are numbers. Well, the same. I mean, the Arabs have numeric systems as well. In fact, I think our system is based on the Arabic system, right? And it stands to question, if the scales are different musically, what is the difference in their numeric systems?
Oh.
And is that resulting in a difference of scale? Is the math affecting the music, or the music affecting the math?
Right, I hear what you're saying.
Because you could say, right, traditional English music probably has some, mathematic information behind it. It's obviously different in sound to an Arab music.
I don't know. That's a great question, and I want to know the answer.
Right. I don't think we will ever know the answer.
I'll take an educated guess and say that the mathematics of Pythagoras that spawned the Western music is probably different than the Arabic numeral system.
Right.
Or the Arabic numeral system was a tool that Pythagoras utilized in creating the Western system, and it doesn't. I mean, just like letters, you can change them up and form different sentences, and you can have Latin versus English. I think the Arabic gave us the numerals, and then we played around with them and came up with our own music.
Right.
That's my guess.
At any event, I don't think we'll ever know the answer, because it's discovery of human civilization is discovering math and discovering music, and then discovering that they overlay.
Right.
But I enjoyed this piece. It was nice.
Yeah.
There was that one part where I think it speeds up a little bit. It gets a little bit more lively. Which is an interesting introduction, because generally when you think of rhythm, you think of a constant time. The time signature of a musical piece tends to be the same. And so it speaks to a level of musical sophistication.
Usually when there's a conductor or someone to impose on it, where when it's an improvised live performance, the time becomes a little malleable.
Oh yeah, definitely. As a drummer, I can tell you, it is unless you're playing to a click, it is 100% impossible to be on time all the way.
Right.
But that speaks, I think, again, to a level of sophistication on their part that they were, because it doesn't seem to me like they are erratic in the time. They go from a lower tempo to a higher tempo, and that higher tempo is relatively consistent for the rest of the piece, which is pretty sophisticated musical composition for people who were just now figuring out scales.
Right.
So that was one thing I noticed as well.
I'd like to listen to Wedding Song next, because there's a high probability that Jesus probably heard a wedding song, because the wedding songs were played in the Temple of Jerusalem. And so let's give that one a listen.
Okay.
Okay, so we listened to Zé Eli Meode. This is My Supreme God. It's a wedding song.
Yes.
Impressions.
It was cool. I guess it was okay. The drum was, it was nice, and the flute was, it sounded all very nice.
And actually that buzzing type of instrument, I think, was perfect. What word am I looking for? When you mix on a table, like a mixing board, when you put some in the background and some in the foreground, I guess just mix.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't in your face and disturbing. It was just kind of in the background, supporting the others.
Yeah, remember we were talking about that last week.
Right.
We were talking about the Alos has this level of dynamics.
Yeah.
You can be really loud with it and get that loud buzzing, or really soft with it and get that nice flute. And I don't know what that instrument was to know if that was an Alos, but it certainly sounded like
But it certainly was a reed type instrument.
Yes, yeah.
And here, speaking of reed types, I don't know if we've mentioned that it's probably the predecessor to like the clarinet and some of those instruments.
Yeah, yeah.
And to be honest with you, that's pretty amazing feat of invention. I mean, it's one thing to take a bone and blow like a whistle, and you're creating a whistle. It's a fancy whistle.
Right.
But then to take cane and shave it down and put it on a mouthpiece of something and get it to vibrate. I mean, that just takes advanced thought.
Yeah, it really does. Well, I mean, common conspiracy theorists think that the ancients had, if you ever watch Ancient Aliens, they think of Joshua's, I think it's Joshua, the horn that took down the walls of one of the cities. I can't remember the story exactly, but the theory is that they understood vibrational frequency, and that some people think that they just had a bunch of horns.
Oh, okay.
And the horn and the frequency of the horns actually resulted in the
destruction
stone
of the stone.
Yeah, the stone to vibrate in a way that destroyed it.
There may or may not be some credibility to that. I mean, I know that when troops walk across bridges, they have to stop doing it in time, or else the bridge will collapse. I remember reading that because of the vibration. So they have to stop and go out of sync, just kind of normal, so that it's not creating.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
but if that is true, then it stands to reason that the theories behind that the wall collapsing because of a large amount of trumpets or horns being blown in its direction.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, maybe the ancient people understood more about frequency, and so they knew about vibrating reeds and more than we believe.
More than us, probably.
Definitely. The other theory goes that that's how they built the pyramids, was with frequency.
Right.
Again, Ancient Aliens, take it for what it is.
Sure. I wanted to reflect back on the song.
Yeah.
It's by the San Antonio Vocal Arts Ensemble,
Mm-hmm.
and you had picked up something about them.
Yeah, so they NPR had done a nice interview, and they spoke with the people who wrote this particular piece, and they spent a few years learning the languages. So they learned Aramaic, which is the language often referred to as the language of the Bible. That's probably what the people that were speaking in that region. They learned the proper pronunciation of Hebrew, because some of these prayers are in Hebrew, and of Arabic as well, because some of the recitations are in Arabic. So they learned all the finer points, and then they derived a lot of this from the Dead Sea Scrolls, from the Old Testament, from the Torah, and then from the New Testament as well, and with the Matthew 5:3 version there. So very interesting. I mean, they did their research. They did their homework before making this.
And it makes a statement that at that time prayers were sung and had musical instrumental accompaniment.
Yes. And you know what made me think of the other thing on the song was it's very Confucian. Going back again to a previous episode.
How do you find it?
Because the music the vocals follow the music.
Oh, okay.
So if you're listening to the singer is following, I think, one of the reed flutes, and almost to the letter. The melodies are right on point.
Well, and that makes sense because in the Western tradition, as we're starting to explore more and more of the music, the melodies are based on language, and then they just get transferred over to the instruments.
Right.
So it makes sense.
It's just it's ironic to see the two
right.
so far away,
right?
And they may have had.
But it's a
trade.
natural progression, though.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there may have been some trade with ancient China, and I don't know how far the ancient Silk Road went.
Right.
But it's possible that the cultures intermingled, and maybe they picked up some music from some Chinese artists back then and said, "Oh, we gotta play this," right? And then next thing you know,
right. Well, speaking, we have to play this. Let's move over to the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
And the Dead Sea Scrolls were written. I looked it up, but I think it's like around 300 BC to 100 AD. So we're just catching that and putting it in this episode. Plus, I think it's a good accompaniment for this episode since we're highlighting the time of Jesus, and he certainly would have heard some of these. And so let's listen to a track or two of this one.
Okay.
So we're listening to the music of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this particular track is called the War Scroll. And in the liner notes, it says, in some cases, it is relatively easy to engage a process of musical construction when a text has remained in the officially sanctioned Jewish order of worship, and consequently still has a surviving oral tune in practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's legitimacy to him reconstructing these pieces that they probably really did sound this way.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that was the later bit, is that they ended up working with a community, a very old community, Jewish community in Australia, to get the scales and everything correct.
Wow.
And they worked meticulously to do that.
Now this particular track, I think, is just gorgeous.
Yeah, it was really...
And I love it. I mean, it starts off with this nice, I don't know if it's baritone or tenor, but the male voices anyways.
Right.
And a deep, flowery display that's just soothing. And then the females come in, kind of like this angelic choir. And you said it was... a representation of...
It's a battle between light and dark.
Light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense. The male voices sounded dark, and the female voices sounded light, and maybe that's where they're going with this.
Could be. It could be. Because, those male voices do sound very foreboding of, like, chaos or, something violent is coming, and then the overtones of the female voices are... kind of counter to that. They're equally foreboding.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in a sense that it gives off, like you're saying, that perhaps they are supposed to represent the side of light.
Right.
Where the males are supposed to represent the side of darkness.
And I'm getting this yin-yang-y type of imagery occurring as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fascinating that this is something that, is a part of the ancient tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't commonly hear of eschatological myths coming out of Judaism. Mm-hmm. It tends to be a Christianity thing.
Right.
The second coming of Jesus and things like that.
Well, let's listen to some more of this.
Yes. I'm going to keep this theme in mind.
Mm-hmm. All right. I should call it uh, part 2 or movement 2.
It seems like it,
because there's a nice break,
Yeah.
and then something completely different happens.
Yes.
You get a solo female voice, and a soprano, in fact. And wow, does she hit those high notes?
Oh yeah.
And they're crystal clear too. There's no
super
wavering.
impressive.
They're not. She hits them dead on.
Yeah, yeah.
And holds them too for that length of time.
I sense no auto tune either. So
right.
Very, very well done.
Really beautiful. And I'm looking at this. It says the writing of the War Scroll was somewhere between 20 and 50 A.D.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this particular track fits right nicely in the time period that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that just made me feel good.
Yeah, and I mean it's an interesting juxtaposition of the two movements we've listened to so far. Is that
Right.
the first has that foreboding presence of the male voices with the female juxtaposition, and here we have a soloist who, to my ears, is actually singing words.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the first movement was kind of just that wordless chanting.
Right.
Especially from the male voices. The female voices might have been actually saying something, but here it sounds like she's actually saying something.
a prayer.
Right.
Or reading the text.
And then at the end of the movement, we get the reintroduction of the choir behind her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested to see what happens in the third movement.
Right.
If we get that sense of foreboding, violence coming or something, right? So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Right. Well, I think this is worth the price of the CD.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I, we both agreed that the CD as a whole, questionable, because the other tracks aren't as mesmerizing.
No.
But I have to say, this track alone is mesmerizing. This is worth getting the CD.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I'm an old guy, and I grew up, CDs was the way of, and nowadays, a lot of people don't use CDs anymore.
No.
But it's from buying these CDs that I find all these gems, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, how would you come across something like this if you weren't buying CDs? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good point.
But anyway, any final thoughts on the track we listened to, or Dead Sea Scrolls in general?
I think the track we just listened to, I was expecting to hear more of the male voices towards the end. I don't think we really got any.
No.
But it ended. I mean, it's a nice piece in total.
Mm-hmm.
The full, and then the rest of it, like you said, it was kind of boring, a little underwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the fact that it's pretty historical,
right,
or at least based in history.
Correct.
Correct.
It's an archaeological musical piece.
Yes. Exactly. And so it's interesting to think about, and I commonly think about this type of thing anyway, but it's interesting to think about the type of people and what they were doing while listening to something like this.
Right.
This particular piece, they were probably in a temple. It was probably a ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
But the wedding song that we listened to earlier,
right,
they were probably having a jovial time and dancing around. Probably smelled terrible because there's no.
And I think wedding songs are probably pretty common.
Yes.
Like because I was thinking about how this is again religious music or music that's centered around some sort of spiritual idea, and that's gonna keep going for the next 1,000 or 1,500 years as we follow the development of Western music, and so that's important music making. And this, I think, the wedding song is one of the, well, I shouldn't say the first. Then there was the drinking song.
Yes.
But it's still a religion. It has to do with because it's funeral rites.
Right.
So it's still kind of around that what happens after death, ceremonial, and then now here we're having the wedding songs. And again, you have that the wedding is a sacrament, the two people coming together and everything. So high points in people's lives are emphasized with music.
Right.
And I'm not sure if we've gotten to just the social song at this point.
No, I think maybe we explored what may have been considered a social song in the Sumerian episode, but it's more social for high class citizens. It would have been people that were going to the palace, right, and perhaps socializing while there was music being written.
Oh, okay.
But not to the level that it was common. Like the common folks probably had.
I remember you're talking about the flood.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or they would be.
Chickpea flour.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Exactly. But there's no. I don't think we've explored any music of the commoner at the time. That would be social music. I think the commoner would know these ceremonial music pieces, whether it's a wedding or a funeral.
And I guess it's questionable whether they actually had music for the commoner or not, because of the fact that we don't have them preserved.
Right.
And I think for the most part, it has to do with reading and the skills of reading and writing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it,
even in ancient Greece.
Right. Yeah. And so the commoner didn't have that, and so they
Right.
probably didn't put down their music.
Until, gosh, I don't even know when.
I don't know either. That's why we'll probably pick it up along the
Yeah.
way.
That'll be an interesting point in
Mhm.
history when the common folk start to make their own music.
So we're going to listen to a CD now. It's called Passion/Sources.
Mm.
And how it derived its title and its being is it comes from the soundtrack of The Last Temptation of Christ by Peter Gabriel.
Okay.
And he wanted to put out a companion album to his soundtrack.
Okay.
And the companion album is in composing his soundtrack, he did musical research, and he went to all the areas that Jesus was supposedly had gone to, which was Egypt and North Africa and India and Jerusalem, and he went and he explored their musical traditions in an attempt to put the influence into his soundtrack, and so now you have the sources.
Yes.
And that's what this is.
That very much
sources.
Explains track 2.
Yes, right.
Which was very Indian. I thought that this was Coptic. This was the area of the Coptic Christians.
Right.
But no, that's interesting background. I did not know that.
And here's a wedding song, from Morocco. A Moroccan wedding song.
Mm-hmm.
We just listened to the Moroccan wedding song. I don't think there's a title to the song. I think it's just a traditional song that they played at Moroccan weddings.
Mm-hmm.
But it just sounds huge. It sounds like 20, 30 drummers are all going on at the same time. And it's festive.
Right.
Which is what a wedding is. It's festive.
Right. It's something that you can definitely dance to,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't know the dance.
Right.
But it did remind me of a previous episode.
Yeah.
Where we explored different music from around the world, and a lot of it had to do with chanting, almost tribal chanting. Really, really reminded me of that.
Music of ancient peoples. If you missed that one, go back and check it out.
That's the one.
Yeah.
and it took a lot of elements of the different tribes that we had listened to on that episode, and in this one seemed to combine them all together.
Yeah, that's fascinating because you're seeing it in a logical stepwise progression.
Yep, exactly, exactly. But this was really cool to add the chanting, the call, and the response from the choir, and then the introduction of all of those drums. I mean, God, I heard at least 3 different types of drums.
Right. Yeah.
In that ensemble. So very cool stuff, this one.
Al Nala Al Ali was the track we just listened to, and I think it just starts off with a bang.
Yeah, that drum comes out of nowhere and just sets the mood immediately.
And it's got a real nice crack to it, you know? It's a clack, clack.
Yep. Really makes you want to dance. And I don't know what it's the High Palm Tree, right? That's the translation.
Yeah, Musicians of the Nile, I believe, is the group that
did it.
Yeah,
it's interesting. That's interesting because the High Palm Tree in Dune, the significance of the date tree was that they were sacred because they used so much water. I wonder if it's the same here.
Right, because Egypt's in the middle of a desert. That makes sense, maybe.
But really cool. I mean, I think that this music is really cool. It's really lively.
Yeah.
And even I think one of the instruments that they're using sounds a lot like an aloes. It's got that really raspy, in your face sound.
Yeah, these two guys.
Yeah.
And then he's got the drum. I wonder if there's a string instrument, and it looks like he's bowing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure. Remember we talked about bowed string instruments and when they're gonna start to make an appearance. Now, obviously, this is listening to traditional music of Egypt. I'm not sure when the bowed string instrument from Egypt came around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
Maybe we should look that up. Oh wait, the Arabic rabab is the earliest known bowed instrument, the ancestor of European bowed instruments.
We've got our work ahead.
Yeah, but the Arabic rebab is one of the oldest bowed string instruments, and
Yes.
which led to European violin family, or the
Mhm.
viols, and then the violins.
Right.
And so they have their place right here.
Mhm.
That's really cool.
Yeah, although I still would hope to explore when they first are introduced to see what they sounded like, because you think about it this way, in the way we were exploring the hydraulis and the music that they were conducting for the hydraulis or writing for the hydraulis.
Right.
Once you've invented a new instrument, you experiment with the ways to play it,
Mm-hmm.
and so it becomes almost a examination from a scientific perspective of this instrument. What can I do with it?
Right.
How can I make it sound?
What are its limitations?
Exactly. And so I think when we get to that point, it'll be interesting to see what the Arabs did with this particular instrument when they first invented it.
Which is really interesting because you bring up something that the great psychologists put into the foreground, like Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers and Carl Jung. It's they're taking that concept that you just said with the musical instrument and applying to human beings. What is the limits of my capabilities, and where can I bring all my my talents to the foreground, and what can I achieve?
Yeah, well, it's foundational to human psychology, I think, really. And if you think about the evolution of human from the the discovery of fire, imagine, oh, I made fire. What can I do with it? Oh, I burned myself. Ooh, it's bad. Oh, I can kill my enemies with it. Oh, I can cook my food with it. Oh, I can keep warm with it.
Yeah.
I can, I don't know, boil water, make bread, right? So so it's, I think it's a very of a thinking, rational being. Once they make a discovery or a new invention, in the case of an instrument, they explore the limitations of it and try to define it. I think is really the critical structure of human psychology.
That's interesting, defining it based on what it can do.
Right, everything based on what it is, what it can do, going right back to fire and into bowed instruments. And
Right.
So when we get to that point, it'll be interesting to see, and I wonder if there is sources that survived the time that are an examination of the original rebab.
Yeah. I don't really know much about Arabic instruments. So track 5, Falahi, the liner notes say that the Falahim, or Egyptian farmers, use this rhythm in their songs of celebration.
Yes.
And so
again, this is I think we were talking earlier about the songs of the commoners.
Right.
And here it is.
There you have it.
But, again, it follows the pattern of celebrating, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's I think, ceremony. They probably would do this in sort of a ceremonious way.
Mm-hmm.
Go bountiful harvest. Let's play the Falahi.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
something like that.
And it makes sense that music is a language, and so the rhythm that they have for the wedding ceremony is going to be similar to the rhythm that they have in other celebratory ceremonies.
Yeah, and I wonder if that speaks to their understanding of music. If they thought of it like, if they understood it to be a universal language in the way that the Greeks do, and perhaps the ancient Israelites did as well. If these ceremonious songs are meant to speak to some universal nature, and ultimately derives why they would do these types of a rain dance is the most common example. Oh, we need rain. Let's make a song in order to make it rain, because they see the harmonious nature between music and the external environment.
Right.
And so maybe it speaks to their understanding of why they would do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
They actually probably truly believed that doing a rain dance would invoke rain.
Right. Just like you
yes.
Right. Someone's doing a rain dance somewhere.
Right.
I watched a series of lectures by Leonard Bernstein, the famous conductor, and he was saying how language probably has a universal origin, and therefore he assumes music as well. And he talked about how the first sound a baby makes is and it's a pleasing sound. It's an indication that I'm pleased.
Right.
And mother comes from that sound.
Yeah.
And in all the different languages, the word for mother often, not every single one, have that M.
Yeah.
And then he talked about anger, how a growl, like the animal, that's a sign of, it's a communicating aggression, it's communicating a warning. And our word anger has that in there, anger. And so there's a universalness to our communicating with sounds, spawning language, but probably also spawning music.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting.
Yeah, he's brilliant. If you haven't seen that, you got to go check that out. I think that the Harvard lectures.
I'll have to check that out, because that's he's approaching now music, his understanding of music from a philology, in terms of the study of the evolution of language.
Right. And he talks about how rhythm is active and it is the musical form of a verb. And
yeah, that makes sense.
And melody, harmony is an adjective because it colors the melody, and the melody would be I'm telling you, you gotta check that out.
That is a brilliant description.
It is. He's great.
Huh. I'm gonna have to check that out.
כשלמה, נוטה שמיים כעירייה, המקרב במים עליותיו, הסמבים רחובו, המהלך על כנפי רוח, עושה מלאכיו רוחות, משרת אבלש לוהט, יסדרת על מכוניה.
So we've listened to compositions that were dated from the time period of 1 AD to 100 AD, starting with the ancient Greeks,
Yes.
and then moving over to ancient echoes, music, prayers that were put to music and sung, and probably Jesus could have been familiar with. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls, again, taking these prayers and these stories and giving them musical frame. And then we moved away from exact replication of written music to music of the time period that traditional music of that time period from various places that Jesus probably was at. And then now with the Yama Ensemble, this is a contemporary version of Psalm 104,
Right.
using both contemporary instruments and ancient instruments.
Right. Right.
I think the one guy had it looked like a cane flute, but then I looked again and it looked a little plastic, so I wasn't really sure.
It's at least a replica, we'll say.
There you go.
הסמבים רחובו, המהלך על כנפי רוח, עושה מלאכיו רוחות, משרת באש לוהט, יסוד ארץ על מכוניה, בלטימות עולם ועד.
And then the thing that he was playing looked like two gourds. I wouldn't know what to call that.
Yeah.
The guitar-like instrument.
Yeah.
And then you said that drum was
I'm pretty sure it was a darbuka.
a darbuka.
Yeah.
Which, can you tell everybody what
It's
that
a
is?
traditional Arabic drum. It's a hand drum that you can play. There's a lot of different ways to play it, but the rim, you tend to get that like bright, attacky feel.
Yeah.
And if you hit the drum, it's more of the bass feel. But you can also change the pitch by pressing the head. So it's played, fingers, thumbs, and your whole hand, and you generally hold it onto the side.
And he was an excellent musician.
Oh my God, he was
Yeah.
he was a phenomenal percussionist.
And then you had she was playing, or at least she had there. I didn't see her play it. It looked like a predecessor to the lute.
She hands it to the other guy.
Oh, that's right.
Mid song,
Got it. And
which in itself is a feat.
yeah, and then you have the stand-up bass,
Yes.
which is a modern day instrument, and beautiful. It was sung beautiful.
את אדוני
צלמה נוטה שמיים כעירייה המקרב המים עליותיו הסמרים רכובו המהלך על כנפי רוח עושה מלאכיו רוחות משרתיו לאש לוהט יסד ארץ על מכוניה בלטימות עולם ועד.
I really liked it.
Yeah, I thought it was really great. And the cool thing as well is that the Psalms, as we know, were sung.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if this isn't exactly how they were sung at the time of David, or in the successive years, this is, I think, a great rendition of that piece. And part of, I think, the what's so great about music, and in particular songs, is that you can do them different ways.
Mm-hmm.
You can explore a song in the same way you explore an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
What are the limitations of All Along the Watchtower?
Right,
How
right,
else
right,
can I
right.
write that?
Yeah, that's really neat because I know that there's sometimes, and I know I can be guilty of there's one right way to play the song,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and the way I listen to it and the way I like it, and what you're saying is contrary and counterintuitive. It's like there's so many different ways to play this song. Let's explore the different ways.
Well, I think it's less the case for classical music. I think classical music is the composers were very deliberate in terms of the time,
Mm-hmm.
the note value. I mean, to the point that they were...
Yeah, they wrote everything down.
They wrote everything down, right? So
Yeah.
there is only one way to play classical music,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. Now you can explore the differences in terms of whether you have a full orchestra or you do it with an ensemble,
Mm-hmm.
and what the limitations are there, or if you play it on piano as
Right.
opposed to an orchestra. But you're not messing with the time
Mhm.
on that, right? Now we explore All Along the Watchtower, which has been done, to my knowledge, at least 4 or 5 different times, written by Bob Dylan, made famous by Jimi Hendrix.
Do you know what the song that has had the most covers?
I don't. I could probably take a guess if I had time to think about it, but on the spot I don't know.
Okay. I believe it's George Gershwin's Summertime.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
And then there's
I think it's a couple 10,000. Yeah.
a perfect, prime example.
And the Beatles Yesterday, I think, is right there. They're neck and neck.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But again, I think speaks to the point. And
Mhm.
and it's,
Exactly,
I
which
think
is why I brought
especially
it.
with prayers, right? Prayers, I don't think are in the same way deliberately composed to be sung one particular way.
No, you're right. And I completely agree with you. And there's evidence of that as we move along into the Gregorian chants. They wanted everyone to participate. And so you have such a wide range of voices, and you have a wide range of skill that you got to keep it simple if you want everyone to participate.
Right, and you got to think about it from Christianity. Now, Judaism is a little bit different in that converts to Judaism, it's much harder, right? But you think about the later monotheistic religions, namely Christianity and Islam, they're all about converting people.
Right, getting
And
as
so-
many people as possible.
Exactly, and so you got to think about languages are obviously different. I think the people understood that at the time. They knew that the Romans spoke Latin and they were speaking Aramaic.
Mhm.
They probably understood that there's other people in the Orient that are speaking a vastly different Sanskrit. Well, Sanskrit is written. I don't recall. I think it's Hindi.
Mhm.
Or speaking Hindi or Jain, whatever it happens to be.
Mhm.
So they understood that languages were different, and so they have to express a prayer in a way that can be adapted to that people in order to convert them,
And they could do it with song.
and they can do it with song.
Now here's, staying with the contemporary theme of ancient prayers, the last piece we're going to listen to is by Lisa Gerard, and it's the Lord's Prayer.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay, just a little something about Lisa Gerrard. Lisa Gerrard is an Australian musician, singer, and composer who rose to prominence as part of the music group Dead Can Dance. She is known for her unique singing style, glossolalia, which is kind of making it up as you go along, and even to where it sounds like you're singing a language that is either made up or non-existent.
Right. And to the the viewer, you might recognize her voice as being on the Gladiator soundtrack, which makes me question whether she was actually singing words in those songs.
Right. If that's her style, I would think that maybe she wasn't.
Right.
But in this particular piece, the one that we listened to, she was singing the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
The Our Father. And so that concludes today's episode. You got comments or impressions about the Lisa Gerrard?
Oh, I thought it was beautiful. Really, really nice. I mean, even it's not something that I would. I mean, I might put it on if the mood struck me and I wanted to be kind of relaxed. It's very relaxing, very soothing. The music in the background kind of just is atmospheric.
Right.
And her voice is beautiful. So very nice to listen to. And I think it says that it was sung in the language of Jesus, which is Aramaic.
Right.
So I'm quite certain that is the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic.
Do you have any impressions about the music we listened to overall? And I'm going to ask you, would you recommend any of it to a friend?
Yeah, I would. I definitely would.
Okay.
And particularly the Peter Gabriel accompanying album of the regional music. I think that was really cool.
Yeah.
I almost sent the Al Nala Al Ali to my friend for him to listen to because his family is of the region. So I thought that would be interesting for him to hear. Oh, this is what we're going to be talking about. So yeah, I certainly would. It was nice. A lot of it was really cool. Some of the historicity of it is also really, really awesome, including the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive that they really are able to find this material and reconstruct it as best as they can.
Yeah, and then in the case of the contemporary take on an ancient text, the piece we listened to of Psalm 104 was also really, really cool. Yeah, I think I would recommend a lot of this to a friend. It was all very, very nice.
Right on. Well, you can recommend it to a friend, and you can recommend your friend continue watching our show.
Stay tuned.